Hey, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on strategies for coordinating and leveraging resources from the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, also known as LIHEAP, and the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, also known as ERA. My name is Lauren Christopher, and I'm the Director for the Division of Energy Assistance in the Office of Community Services here at the Administration for Children and Families. On behalf of our Office Director, Dr. Laniqua Howard, I thank you for taking the time out of your busy day today to participate in this webinar. She wanted to be a part of this session, but is triple booked for presentations presently. As you've likely heard, home energy prices and energy prices in general among all heating sources are projected to rise across the country this winter. In light of this, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the U.S. Department of Treasury and the White House have been working together on a strategy to meet the home energy needs of families this winter. And we are here today as part of our ongoing partnership with the Treasury Department and the White House to ensure that LIHEAP and ERA are leveraged effectively to meet the home energy needs of households across the country this winter. With respect to our agenda for this webinar, we will hear from the White House about the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to utility assistance for vulnerable households. We will also hear from our LIHEAP and ERA teams who will discuss technical assistance tools and best practices for coordinating these critical programs. We also have a panel of our colleagues from Minnesota, the state of Washington, and Michigan to hear about their work coordinating these programs at the state and local levels. Finally, we will close with a Q&A session. I encourage you to put all of your questions in the Q&A box that's at the center bottom of your screen throughout the meeting. Our panelists will answer those questions via the Q&A box during the meeting, and the moderator for today's panel will select unanswered questions to present during the live Q&A session. To ensure that we do not accidentally miss any questions, please make sure you put those questions in the Q&A box. Save the chat box for your general comments and greetings. The Q&A moderator today will be Ms. Heather Jones. Many of you know her as the former LIHEAP director for the state of Missouri. She retired from that position, and we were lucky enough to bring her on board as our interim policy and evaluation branch chief for our federal LIHEAP team. We are very grateful to have her on board and join our team. After today, we will release a copy of this webinar recording as soon as the closed captioning is available. We have already posted the slide deck to our LIHEAP website, and that link will be available in the chat box for you to access. With that, I want to turn it over to Mr. Ted Lee, who is with the Executive Office of the President's American Rescue Plan team. Ted?
Thank you for that introduction, Lauren. And I just want to thank all of the attendees today for all of the work that you're doing to help families with their heating and other costs this winter. As Lauren mentioned, this is a key administration priority. Many of you attended last month's convening at the White House, where we heard from Secretaries Granholm and Becerra, as well as other senior administration officials about the best practices and other areas that we'd like grantees to focus on this winter. And because this is such a key administration priority, that's why we at the White House have been partnering with the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Treasury to ensure that we have a coordinated federal approach to utilize all available resources to support American households this winter. Among those resources are those provided by the American Rescue Plan, which included $4.5 billion in LIHEAP, which should allow grantees to serve more households and more of households' energy burdens than ever before. The ARP also included additional funds for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, in addition to the $25 billion that were previously made available through other coronavirus relief legislation. This will be the first winter where we have the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, as well as the Homeowners Assistance Fund programs, in addition to LIHEAP. And given that this is a new instance of coordinating programs, it's critical to ensure that these programs are working together to support families. And that's why in November, the White House issued a call to action to grantees to adopt best practices and expedite assistance. And that's really why I know all of you are here today, is to learn more about how to do this. And again, I want to thank you for taking steps in this direction. We also know that there is a lot of work beyond what our grantees can do. And that's why we're asking utility companies to proactively use their resources to help as well. We at the White House have gathered a set of initial commitments, which are available in a White House fact sheet. If you are in the coverage area of those utilities, know that you have a friendly partner who is excited to help in these areas. We also ask you to encourage your utility company partners to make similar commitments if they haven't already. And we at the White House would be very happy to gather that that commitment as well, so that other utilities can join their peers. Finally, we would be very thrilled to highlight the best practices that all of you are adopting in response to this call to action, and look forward to hearing from the Treasury and the ACF teams about all the operational improvements your teams are making. So would encourage you to share how those different improvements are making a difference for households in your state. And with that, I will turn it back over to the rest of the team. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted, and thank you, Lauren. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone who has joined us today. First of all, my sympathies to our network in Kentucky and other states where a tornado has hit in many locations. As we are presenting at this webinar, thousands of households are without power. We will talk about LIHEAP and how LIHEAP can help today for those customers. Thank you. As we have been discussing this, as you can see that 2021 and 2022, these 2 years have been historic years for LIHEAP appropriations. Last year, earlier this year, we received $4.5 billion in American Rescue Fund. We released those funds in May of this year, followed by a regular funding release under the CR, which happened on November 1st, $3.37 billion. And the most recent update to LIHEAP appropriation is another $100 million per year in appropriation under the Infrastructure Jobs Act. This is some sort of a forward funding that will be available for the next 5 federal fiscal years to our LIHEAP grantees. And we are happy to announce that we are in the process of releasing the first round of $100 million funding pretty soon. So these funds will be available for obligation through fiscal year 2026. The initial funding, again, will be released this year. What we believe by discussing various funding options with our grantees, that a significant amount of LIHEAP ARP funding, as well as the annual block grant that we just released, should be available for our households for benefit assistance, which is a great news because with the rising fuel prices, our grantees will be looking for all the resources that are available on the table. Next slide, please. Since we have different types of audience today, I'm going to quickly go through some basic information about LIHEAP, what it is and how it works. First of all, it's a long-standing federal program. We just celebrated the 40th anniversary of LIHEAP on August 13th of this year. This program was first appropriated in 1981, 40 years ago. So it's a long-standing federal support for our grantees to provide not just heating assistance, but also cooling assistance, crisis assistance, especially in a situation like hurricanes, tornadoes, natural disaster. We know that many households also receive utility disconnection notice each year. So LIHEAP crisis assistance can help those families and households. And also our grantees can set aside up to 15% of the LIHEAP allocation for weatherization purposes. And with a written waiver from SEF, they can increase that up to 25%. What is interesting about weatherization allocation is that those funds can be used for low-cost home weatherization, which can bring energy efficiency to our communities, which can also reduce consumption and therefore reduce energy burden for millions of low-income customers across the country. A couple of other basic facts from our office, Administration for Children and Families. We allocate LIHEAP funding to all 50 states, Washington, D.C., 5 U.S. territories, and approximately 150 Native American organizations. For implementation of LIHEAP, many of our state grantees allocate funding to their local agencies. So in many locations, LIHEAP is implemented through a local community action agency or a nonprofit organization. Another key item for LIHEAP to highlight here is that it can serve a variety of households. Especially we also focus when we talk about LIHEAP about targeting certain type of households that have elderly living in that household, a household with young children, especially under the age of 6, also household with disabled individuals. Our grantees can prioritize those households when they provide assistance. Next slide, please. Okay, a few more basic information about LIHEAP. I call them refresher. Even if you're a LIHEAP individual, it's always helpful to discuss these basic facts. First of all, when a LIHEAP benefit is designed, it's very important to keep in mind that energy burden or someone's energy need should be taken into consideration. Income-wise, LIHEAP is a block grant, so it has a lot of flexibility available for our grantees. Income is one good example where our grantees can set the maximum LIHEAP income anywhere between 150% of federal poverty level and 60% of SMI. So when we talk to our states, we see various ways our grantees are implementing this upper limit for LIHEAP. I also mentioned priority households. Also, when our LIHEAP grantees design their program, we always encourage them to create a benefit structure in a way so that it can provide the maximum possible benefit to household with lowest income in relation to family size. And finally, one additional point is about categorical eligibility, what we call. Basically, this provision within the LIHEAP statute allows our grantees to make households income eligible if they are also receiving one of these 4 programs, federal programs: temporary assistance for needy families, TANF, SSI, SNAP, which is also known as food stamps, and certain veterans programs. So if households are receiving these programs, they can be made income eligible through LIHEAP, which can also help reduce paperwork burden. In some cases, it can also expedite income verification process. Next slide, please. Okay, so with that, I'm going to now move on to our next segment, which is basically the coordination between LIHEAP and ERA component of today's presentation, which is the key that we are all discussing here today. First of all, an important clarification. We got a lot of questions about LIHEAP and ERA benefit, whether it's considered a duplicate benefit from LIHEAP standpoint. And I wanted to reiterate that it's not. So if a household receives LIHEAP benefit, it does not preclude them from receiving ERA benefit. Obviously, we want proper credit on their utility accounts and home energy accounts with both funds being braided, which is, again, it's a really nice noteworthy practice to braid LIHEAP funding with the ERA benefit, because as you know, during this pandemic, our households have experienced an increase in their home energy burden. Many households have unpaid utility bills, so braiding resources is always encouraged. Furthermore, people who know a little bit more about LIHEAP, they know that it's actually, in fact, a requirement for our LIHEAP grantees to conduct outreach to their communities and also coordinate benefits with other low-income programs. We believe that coordinating LIHEAP with ERA, LIHEAP with weatherization assistance, LIHEAP with CSBG, with water assistance program would most likely fit into that program coordination component. We also know that I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that many of our households are also receiving disconnection notices. This is very important to know that in many states, there is a voluntary moratorium process in place, which means that many large utility companies, obviously municipal companies, are not required to do utility moratorium shut-off protection for our customers, but that shut-off protection can end once the heating season ends. So it is very important for our customers to understand that they can also receive LIHEAP services through crisis assistance. Grantees are required to provide assistance or provide a solution to their home energy crisis within 18 or 48 hours of receiving the application. We believe that we have a big opportunity here to braid funding with ERA. Next slide, please. Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to what I call 4 Hows. How can we implement best practices in terms of coordinating services between LIHEAP and ERA? There are many noteworthy practices, but I want to just highlight 4 of them. For example, when a LIHEAP household receives LIHEAP benefit, but they also need rental assistance, we can refer them to the ERA program and coordinate rental assistance for those households. We can also serve LIHEAP households with ERA benefit in situations when their LIHEAP benefit is not enough to pay their utility bills. We call it braiding of benefits. We can also help a LIHEAP customers who is a rental who is otherwise not eligible. For example, if they are not income eligible, in many communities, they could be eligible for ERA benefits. So therefore, referring them to a local ERA program is absolutely important. And finally, there could be any situations when a local agency could run out of funds, LIHEAP funds, or they might have some other constraints in terms of serving a LIHEAP household. We always encourage them to refer those households to ERA. With that, we're going to move to our next segment of today's presentation. You already know that our customers are experiencing price increases based on information from Energy Information Administration of DOE. We understand that fuel prices are increasing across the country. It is important for us to understand that these price increases are not going to impact all of our customers the same way. Households who live in urban areas versus rural areas, households who have lowest income, households with minorities. This we understand households, and also most important, households with different kinds of fuel prices will see their impact differently. Next slide, please. So what we have done within ACF and OCS is that we have started to create some TNTA tool for our customers, for our grantees, for them to fully understand how the price impact is going to basically impact their households, state by state, region by region. So with that, I'm going to hand over this next segment of the presentation to Holly Ravensloot, whose team has been earnestly working to create a very nice dashboard. So without any further delay, Holly, you're next. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Akam. And prior to sharing the dashboard, as I'm moving the screen over at this point, I want to give you guys a little bit of background on what is a GIS and the dashboard and why we use this tool to create this. So the field of GIS, Geographic Information Systems, started in 1960 as computers and early concepts of quantitative and computational geography emerged. Over time, it has developed into a powerful tool that allows users to solve problems and make informed decisions. And for our purposes, the decision we're looking at as it relates to community services, resource allocation, and obviously other things. But this is an interactive tool. So GIS is not just maps. And I want to make sure you guys are aware that you have access to the link in your chat if you want to navigate along with me. I'm going to provide a brief overview of what is in this current dashboard so you can navigate and click around at your leisure. So this is the projected increase in energy bills for LIHEAP households. This first landing page is indicated on the bottom here, indicates main heating fuel bill. And the column here are what was reported to ACF as the FY 2020 average annual expenditures based off LIHEAP households. And what you see here in the lighter bar is the projected average annual expenditures based off of the EIA projection of increase. What we did is we included the main fuel types that LIHEAP households and recipients report, which are fuel, natural gas, electric, and propane. I also want to point out that there are 4 tabs on the bottom. You see the main heating fuel, which is the one we are currently on. You see electric and bill total, because in order to make appliances work, you need electricity. And we wanted to make sure we provided the full picture of the impact on LIHEAP households. And then the next tab actually looks at a regional breakdown. And why I want everybody to be aware of this last tab, it's actually the instructions on how to navigate this. I will show you all of these, but you can obviously look at this at your leisure. Another thing I want to point out is that we have a variety of screen sizes, and we know that. So this tool is actually flexible to where if you don't have all the items pull up when you click on the link, that you can actually drag those to be able to see what is there and make sure you can look at the different components of the dashboard. And the other key thing I forgot to point out right out in the beginning is that you will want to open this in Google Chrome and or Microsoft Edge. It was on the slide, but just want to make sure if you clicked on it and your computer defaults to Explorer like mine does, you know, it doesn't work there. Explorer is not supported very much anymore. All right, so looking at this, this is the national data related to LIHEAP households. And over here on the left-hand side, you see the total projected increase for households in each state. And this is regardless of fuel. So you see a $292 increase. And then obviously it's broken out here by different fuel types. So what we also did was incorporate a census map of the American Community Survey predominantly used heating fuel. LIHEAP tends to report at the state level to the federal agency organization. So we wanted to make sure that we incorporated a tool where folks could actually drill down to the specifics of their state. So if I were to come over to the map and click on Ohio, this is census level data on households who have different fuel types. And it's not LIHEAP households, these are all households. And we color coded these to correlate with the various colors within this dashboard. So you can see in Ohio where the various utility sources are being used. And these are for households owned and rented, just as a heads up. The other thing you can do is navigate at a more granular level and looking at a state by clicking the select a state item up here and scrolling down to the state. I'm going to pick on Ohio, mainly because that's where I was born and raised. No other reason. I love Ohio. So when you click on Ohio, you can actually see in this view the various heat sources broken down by county. So you can see in Hamilton County, Ohio, right here, that utility gas is the predominantly used fuel by household. You can see what that increase is going to be potentially for that household. And then you also see the average annual expenditures, and then you see what the anticipated increase is going to be. Another feature, if you're specifically looking for a certain location, you can actually type in an address right here in the search bar up in the upper right-hand corner. And if you want to see the breakdown of what the various, like as we would know it as a map legend, it would be this information right over here. And it's breaking down the various components that you can actually interpret the map. So several different things you can click on and explore as it relates to main heating fuel. Now, if I move on to the electric bill and total bill, this image maintains that same selector of Ohio up here on the right. And now what you're actually seeing as calculated over here are the increases by heating type when it comes to electric. So if a recipient used a nominal benefit of $40 for natural gas households for electricity in the state of Ohio, not that this is true, but is an example, then that nominal benefit would not cover the projected increase in electric expenditures to just maintain the baseline electric needs of that household. And right here across the bottom, we actually indicate the combination of what's on the heating fuel side over here, the $418 added in to make the $473. And then the last tab prior to the instructions is a regional tab, a regional breakdown. So what this is showing here, again, it's a national, it does not maintain the Ohio selector because this is regional based. We use the census regions to kind of break this down. And I stuck with Ohio, so I'm going to go with the Midwest here. And in the Midwest, you see the total projected increase per recipient household, regardless of fuel type, is $399. Right here down the middle, you see the projected increase in heating fuel expenditures per recipient household. And over here underneath the graphic, you see the electric increase expenditures per recipient household. And the last tab in the dashboard are the instructions. So you didn't have to memorize everything I just showed you. You can actually go through this tab and it'll walk through how to navigate the dashboard as you continue to use it. So that's the LIHEAP dashboard as it relates to utility bill increase projections from EIA. I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat, and I am now going to turn it over to Vanessa McGraw on the Treasury team to discuss the ERA program. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. So I am the ERA grantee outreach lead for the emergency housing team at the Treasury. And I spent a lot of time talking to grantees about implementing their programs. And before I get going, I've prepared these slides to talk a little bit about the ERA program and what we have as tools for ERA program administrators to develop their utility and energy assistance as part of their emergency rental assistance program. These slides are a bit stylized for the presentation. So for actual guidance, please see our website. Next slide. The ERA program, just in general, makes funding available to assist households that are unable to pay rent or utilities. The funds are provided directly to states, U.S. territories, local governments, so that's counties and cities. And in the case of ERA 1, Indian tribes or tribally designated housing entities. So there are a lot of grantees across the country, and this is a block grant program like LIHEAP, and so there's a lot of decisions being made by grantees across the country about how they are developing their programs to suit their local need. Next slide, please. And so how's the money moving along? Well, as of the end of October, we've had 2.5 million payments in support of housing stability for low-income renters. And right now, the Treasury is projecting that $25 to $30 billion of ERA 1 and 2 funds will be spent or obligated by year end. So there has been a tremendous amount of velocity of spending ERA funds, particularly in the last couple of months as local communities are meeting the emergency situation of trying to working to keep renters housed. There is a great deal of variety though across the country about how much the velocity of how much is being spent for ERA 1 and ERA 2. So some grantees are reaching the end of their funds, while others are in the middle of spending their funds. And for those that are starting to see the end, we're encouraging states and localities to consider the use of other funds, including $350 billion for the state and local fiscal recovery funds to provide additional support to renters and continue in developing this, continue use of this infrastructure that has been built in a very quick period across the country by grantees to support renters. It's been a really important and novel development of infrastructure to support people, and we're excited to see what it means for the country in the long run. Next slide. Okay, so just a few basics about the ERA program. For program eligibility, an applicant must be obligated to pay rent in some way or another. So the applicant must demonstrate financial hardship during the pandemic. They must show risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability, and the household must be a low-income family where the income does not exceed 80% of the area median income. Now, the eligibility requirements vary between whether it's the ERA 1 or ERA 2 program. There might also be some prioritization decisions being made at the local level. The statute requires that grantees prioritize those at 50% of area median income, or households where one or more individuals have been unemployed for the 90-day period preceding the date of the application, but there might be additional prioritization strategies in place. So there is some variety on the ground. Next slide. But as we're thinking about eligibility standards, under ERA 1 related to financial distress for a household who is experiencing, the statute says, well, the requirement is that it must be financial distress due to directly or indirectly the COVID-19 pandemic. The Treasury has developed several example application screens that show examples of what grantees are using across the country to determine various eligibility standards, including COVID-19 pandemic impact. So these are, these are also informed by some of the questions that we've received. And one addition that has been made to this example screen that I really wanted to point out to all of the ERA administrators that are on this webinar is that the winter increased renter, the increased energy costs for this winter have been determined to be in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so these can be an eligible increase in cost for households across the country. And so if you're a program administrator and you're interested in including that in your eligibility requirements for financial distress, you can check out our example application screen and see how this has been incorporated in this example as a potential application that could be developed. Okay, next slide. One up. Okay, and we've also incorporated this into the example application screen to show risk of housing instability or homelessness And this is an example of how this might be incorporated into a self-attestation about risk of housing instability or homelessness. There are a variety of self-attestations or ways that an application might be presented to people on this page. So I encourage people to check out these application screens because they can be really interesting and might help you to develop your programs a little bit more and serve more people in your community. Next slide. So what can ERA eligible what can ERA funds cover? Well, it can cover rental assistance up to 15 months, or in the case of ERA 1, or 18 months in the case of ERA 2, and this can be back rent or prospective rent. But for the purposes of this webinar, it can cover utilities and home energy costs as well. So this can include fuel, oil, as well as electricity, gas. Public utilities are permitted, and there are other expenses that may be covered, including relocation expenses, reasonable accrued late fees, and not included in this slide, but very importantly, there's some of the funds may be used to support housing stability services, eviction diversion services, etc. That's just a little bit of basics. Next slide. Okay, so because utility assistance can be provided, there is a lot of benefits in thinking through how you might refer people to LIHEAP, or consider coordinating with the local LIHEAP program. ERA programs in some cases are being run centrally by a city, a county, state. In other cases, it's being run by a community-based organization on the ground. Sometimes those organizations are also running LIHEAP programs. Other times they're not. It's really important to really understand what the landscape looks like and who is offering these different programs within your area. So there might be some reasons why, even though if you are offering utilities, some reasons why an ERA program might refer people to LIHEAP programs are for programmatic reasons. For instance, if the ERA program decided not to provide utility assistance, because that is an option as well, then coordination with LIHEAP would be extremely important. Or someone is reaching out, but they're actually a homeowner and they need utility assistance, for instance. But these are pretty obvious reasons, but the one that I want to point out, it relates to those households that are facing a home energy crisis. As Akim mentioned earlier, there are certain provisions in LIHEAP that give households some additional protections related to avoiding shutoffs or connecting them to assistance in a very quick fashion. And in some cases, households might really benefit from that. So if you're thinking about how to maximize providing utility assistance within your community, that might be a reason to consider referring someone to a LIHEAP program. Okay, next slide. So we've outlined a lot of these same practices, helpful practices in the promising practices section of our website. This is now split into two sections. One, working with energy providers to increase efficiency and reach, and two, coordination with other utility assistance programs like LIHEAP or even the Homeowners Assistance Fund if it applies within your state. So it really, again, depends upon who the players are within your community, how to best assist households. there's a lot of really interesting things in here about developing programs to support improved relationships with the utility companies, for instance. When you are working with the utility companies and coordinating your ERA programs with the utility companies, there's the benefit that they can provide education to potentially eligible households within your community. It can help you really reach eligible households. There may be data that helps you to better identify and target households, for instance. And strong relationships with utilities has proven to provide more expedited benefits of an ERA application in utilities, housing stability related to utilities. For instance, we have examples from Richland County and Shelby County that show that by working on developing those relationships with utilities, they really expedited benefits. And we have a new example from Connecticut that shows how combining data with some really great, interesting operational strategies around robocalling and call centers can really help to expedite utility assistance to households that are who are likely to be ERA eligible households, and really maximize benefits to people in your community. And then the rest of and then we really get into all the details that Akim sort of described above about the benefits of coordination with LIHEAP, and we are reiterating the importance of rating those resources, thinking about how to best serve households in your community to maximize the benefits of these various programs. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Heather Jones, because I think who you really want to listen to are the people on the ground who are promoting, implementing these programs, and listen to their experiences. But thank you, and I hope you check out those resources that we have on our website.
Thank you, Vanessa. Today we're joined by panelists across the country who will discuss some of the promising practices laid out in our collaboration guidance. The guidance identifies 7 promising areas that can help assist LIHEAP and ERA coordination, including regular communications between LIHEAP and ERA program leadership, regular stakeholder communications, collaborative review of local program offerings, policy coordination, coordinated outreach, categorical eligibility, data sharing, linked application or referral systems. The guidance also discussed the best practices for coordinating with utility providers. And while we have discussed this and will continue to highlight some of these best practices today, OCS will be hosting a webinar early in the new year devoted to this topic as well. With that, I would like to turn it over to Michael Schmitz of Minnesota.
Thank you, Heather. In Minnesota, LIHEAP is administered by the state's Commerce Department, and the Emergency Rental Assistance Program is administered by Minnesota Housing. And so, as you can see, we're in 2 different departments, and so that creates some challenges. And some of the key elements of our LIHEAP ERA coordination include frequent and regular meetings between program staff and the different departments, designated staff, coordination directly with major utilities, managing data access and utilizing central data systems where possible, and joint inter-complementary outreach. And I'll get into each of those different areas just a little bit more here to give you a little bit more idea of how we actually do this in practice. So we met with Minnesota Housing, I'd say early and pretty often. One of the things I think that was really helpful there was that Minnesota Housing already had somebody on their team who was interacting with the Department of Commerce through some of our energy efficiency work. And so kind of utilizing that relationship enabled us to connect pretty quickly. I think we then quickly identified some opportunities for joint outreach and brainstorm other coordination opportunities. We started weekly summer LIHEAP and utility outreach meetings that then became a venue to bring up shared concerns or issues or improve coordination. And so I think all of those were very helpful aspects of our ongoing coordination. One other thing just to know is that, so for designated staff, I already mentioned that we connected with an existing relationship. I think it was extremely helpful. We've continued to work closely together throughout the past 6 months, and having somebody who's kind of the point person for that relationship, I think has made it pretty clear how we can continue to affect positive coordination. Again, with that coordination directly with major utilities, these initially were just related to LIHEAP, as I mentioned, and it was in part because we received a lot of money for as part of the American Rescue Plan. We were using that opportunity to expand our outreach, coordinate the messaging with utilities directly, and I think that ended up being very fruitful. And as part of those meetings, we started having a greater understanding of some of the issues that were coming up around coordination between LIHEAP and ERA. And so then LIHEAP, because we have long-standing relationships with utilities as part of our program, we were able to facilitate a better connection between ERA and those utilities directly. And I know that within the past few months, Minnesota Housing has been convening regularly with the utilities directly, and including a LIHEAP staff person on those meetings to answer questions and continue coordination. Another thing that was beneficial about the relationships with utilities is that we elevated the needs to the right level at the utility level. So we had our deputy commissioner at Commerce connect with management at some of the large utilities in the state, who were able to gather resources and redirect them to this effort, who were able to approve spending on things like ad buys and those kinds of things, which I think was also extremely helpful. And then recently, we've been working on managing data access and utilizing centralized data systems. So Minnesota verifies past due amounts directly with utilities for LIHEAP. We've recently added Minnesota Housing to our application privacy notice and granted them access to our centralized data system so that they can see the status of an application for LIHEAP and payments and that sort of thing. And then I think I've already touched a bit on some of the joint and or complementary outreach.
So Michael, how did your partnership start, with the Emergency Rental Assistance Program? How did you get that partnership off the ground?
So really it was a connection between our assistant commissioner, who had been doing work with a clean energy policy person over at ERA already. So in the Minnesota Department of Commerce, we have an energy division, and LIHEAP is within that division. And so having that existing connection got us kind of in the door, meeting with folks right away off the bat. And I think that was very helpful.
Right. So it sounds like you guys have a lot of coordination in the state of Minnesota. How did you start your joint coordination with the utility companies? You kind of touched on that. Can you give us a little bit more information about it?
So I would say that the LIHEAP office for the state of Minnesota has had a very strong relationship with utilities for a long time. We've used energy cost information from utilities for about 15 years in determining our benefits. We actually have a staff member on my team who is designated as our energy vendor relationship manager. And so he meets with them regularly, helps them with any payment issues and that kind of thing. So it was a pretty easy thing for us to start saying, we've got a lot of money coming in through LIHEAP, and we've got this other money coming in. Let's talk about that and figure out what we can do for outreach.
That's great. Hey, Michael, I appreciate it so much. I now want to turn the floor over to Brian Sorensen of Washington State. Brian?
I was talking and muted myself, and I apologize. I always say something really poignant when I'm muted,
okay.
So I apologize. Hi, my name is Brian Sorensen. I work for the Department of Commerce, and I am the LIHEAP Program Manager. Also inside the Department of Commerce, we have the Housing Finance Unit administered by Ted Keller, and Catherine Dodge is the emergency rental assistance coordinator for that. And when we had the emergency rental assistance come to the Department of Commerce, the LIHEAP side was just asked some questions. We hold vendor agreements with utilities, with the 7 largest utilities in our state. And so we made a warm handoff to them so that they could coordinate that. Along with that, we also shared information from our personal dashboard that has to do with our LIHEAP data. And so as you can see by this, we can, for the past 3 years, identify households, whether they're subsidized or rental, or if they're owned, where they can go to the mortgage assistant, and also what type of houses they have, whether they're single family homes, 4 units and whatnot. So we took a stance of just being collaborative and answering questions, because we have to be flexible. In LIHEAP, we have 26 community action agencies, and in ERA, 18 community action agencies provide the ERA benefit, but only 8 of them reside LIHEAP and the rental assistance program together. So the amount of information that we can share differs depending on who the administrator of ERA is. But we've just kept the lines of communication open with our internal partners here at Commerce, with the community action agencies, and you know, flexibility and communication are key to our rollout here. So I will stop sharing that screen. And we are fortunate to be joined by a very wonderful person by the name of Lorena Shaw. She is the coordinator for one of our community action agencies and is the ERA as well. So welcome, Lorena. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. As Brian said, I'm Lorena. I'm from Opportunity Council. We're a private nonprofit community action agency up in the northwest corner of Washington State. We've been in the news a couple of times this year, one for the heat wave back in July. And unfortunately, just last month, we had us and our neighbors to the north in Canada had 2 major flood events that we are still in recovery from in our area. We're right up against the Canadian border. So like all community action agencies, we are a unique combination of programs. And under my wheelhouse is the energy assistance programs and our employment programs. And also, as of just a couple of months ago, our emergency rental assistance programs. Next slide, please. So talking about how we approached coordination between LIHEAP and the ERA, it really started from the earliest steps we took before I was the manager of the program was putting in place a specialist, a utility specialist that was going to coordinate benefits between the ERA program and the energy assistance program. So this specialist came out of the LIHEAP program and worked in our other energy assistance programs. And we kept her embedded in energy assistance, but loaned her out to the ERA program. And the idea was that any person coming through for emergency rental assistance would and had utility arrearages would go over and meet with this position and have a second appointment essentially with the utility specialist. And so during that appointment, the specialist is determining all the arrearages that we can address through the ERA program, and then makes a referral to LIHEAP energy assistance and our other energy assistance, including some that are held with our investor-owned utilities as well and can only be applied for through those utilities. So she just a real expert on all things related to energy assistance at the agency in the region, and then became an expert on utility assistance with the ERA program. This really helped for a few different reasons. So the clients were receiving one consistent and accurate message about all the utility program that they may be eligible for. They could be, a warm handoff. There could be just a referral and, letting them know how to make an appointment in the future as needed, or when systems are open, she can make an energy appointment directly for that client. So it's really sort of what, doing that quick assessment of what is it that the client needs, what programs do they need to be connected with, and then coordinating those while dealing with the arrearages through the ERA program. It also benefited because we were able to adopt the business processes benefits from the energy assistance workflow, which is a very highly efficient workflow, whereas ERA was a brand new team trying to put workflows and business processes together. It also allowed us to leverage those already developed relationships we had with all of our energy vendors. We work with our big IOUs, all the municipals, and so we were really able to leverage that for the ERA program and help our utilities, especially the smaller ones, really understand what it was that was coming to the community. And it was very cool because it also allowed us to get a jump start on developing vendor relationships with our water vendors, as we knew that the LIHEAP program was going to be coming to the agency. And so we knew we were going to have to build those relationships and, ask them to sign vendor agreements, and all that legwork that she was able to do in that utility specialist position really allowed us to do that. She was also, I see some questions about how do we determine how many months we're serving with utilities? And this has been, it's just a real a complicated area, but her expertise, she already knew how to look at bill history. She knew how to ask for what she needed from the utilities. And that really helped us out in nailing down how it was we were going to determine months for utility assistance, which is something we don't have to do with LIHEAP. Additionally, it just allowed for a more consistent communication across the board with the utility vendors, and helping all those vendors understand what we're doing. And then another, now both programs share a manager, that's me, and we've been able to further empower all of our intake specialists with the knowledge of both programs, and that utility specialist works really as a liaison between both programs, attends both team meetings, and provides all that information on how one can apply for each program. The other thing, which I'll discuss in just a second, is our buy-in for outreach contracts, and those have really helped us reach those underserved populations, and that's been that's been a really important change to all of our systems, is tapping into to those agencies and organizations for help in finding those folks that we weren't finding on our own. We look forward to further coordinating benefits even stronger, but we feel like we're in a good place with having that one position really be dedicated to that.
Okay. So what strategies do you use, Lorena, to ensure that local households have the information they need about the LIHEAP and ERA programs, and how your organization can help them? I know you're talking a lot about outreach, but how does the general public get that information?
Yeah, so the general public, we use the sort of normal and typical outreach methods. So we, try to put PSAs into all of our local papers. For LIHEAP this spring, I actually did a whole round of paid advertising across all of our media outlets in the area to bring people into the program, as we knew that the ARP benefits were coming, and we really wanted to get the word out about that. But we've also relied on a lot of word of mouth, social media, all the things that all of you all are probably doing to try to reach your populations. And then at the agency, it's really a no wrong door policy. So we're, whether you are calling into our community resource center, or you're having an energy assistance appointment or a rental assistance appointment, we are going to do an assessment of your situation and make the referrals to the programs that may benefit you. With LIHEAP, it's a direct referral to weatherization. It's informing people about rental assistance. And so it's really about that no wrong door, and empowering all of the staff that are working at the client level to know about the programs, because most of these are housed within their department. We have a team of 75 staff in our department, lots of programs going on, but there are some of those core programs that we really want our intake specialist to be referring to regularly. And then, as I mentioned, those by and for contracts. So those are contracts, those are basically, supporting financially organizations that are by and for the populations that we serve. And for those, it's anything from helping a client, connect to the online scheduling system, or it could be an outreach case manager handling that rental assistance appointment. And we really think this is a good model for expanding our outreach into future years with different types of programs.
So you talked a little bit about your communication with utility vendors and coordinating that with the water and energy program. What is your relationship like with the local utility companies? Do you communicate and share data and have a good, how does that relationship and what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a really strong relationship. As Brian mentioned, there are some overarching agreements between our investor-owned utilities and in the state. We also have individual agreements with the utility companies. We have been a state that's used consumption history since I began in the program, back in the early 2000s. And so we've always had those relationships. And in what we did with this one is they really relied on some of the agencies that were sharing ERA and LIHEAP to understand what was going on. What does this look like at the local level at your agency? And so they really leaned on us to really try to understand what the ERA program, what it was going to bring to their utilities. And one thing that we did with them was we developed an ROI, a release of information that any utility could use in the ERA, for the ERA programs. We have these agreements through our vendor agreements with LIHEAP, but they do not extend to ERA necessarily. And so we developed an individual ROI that was, very specific to what us and the utility would need as far as safeguarding that information and under what circumstances that information could be gathered. And so that ROI was, run through our largest investor-owned utilities legal, and then was shared out with their entire network of ERA recipients so that they could have that in place so that there would be running into no issues of sharing consumption or billing data with ERA programs. So that's one area where we were able to kind of step in at the local level and fill a hole that Commerce may not have recognized was there, just because this is our expertise as utility assistants in LIHEAP, and so we were really able to leverage that for the ERA program.
Right, and when you're referencing ROI, I'm assuming that means release of information.
Release of information, that's right. Yeah.
It can be shared with other programs. Okay, great. So what challenges have you encountered coordinating LIHEAP and ERA, and how have you addressed those challenges, Lorena?
Yeah, so the biggest one is for us. So I really had envisioned at the beginning that we would be, truly coordinating benefits in the sense that they would have this appointment and they would be, getting connected to the utility run arrearage programs, the LIHEAP and utility run programs that we run, and ERA. And because of the documentation differences, that didn't really work out. And partially that was, we were finding that clients that were accessing ERA were very much focused, and their stress lied in their need for rental assistance, and kind of complicating the conversation with LIHEAP and the requirements for LIHEAP. Just really, all in that kind of initial meeting or screening or scheduling just really wasn't what clients were looking for. And so we found it to be a better use to just have very clear and consistent messaging about how one could access those programs and helping them connect to those programs if that was needed. And so that's probably about the biggest challenge. I'm still challenging my utility specialist to figure out if there's a way, now that she has more experience doing this, if we can coordinate further. And I'm also, and actually delivering the benefits. I'm also excited to hear more from our own state about LIHEAP being a categorical eligibility program for our rental assistance program.
Well, that's a great lesson learned to be shared with everybody. In addition to that you still see that as an opportunity to coordinate those benefits and try to work through those issues that you're dealing with. Really want to thank you, Lorena. I'm now going to turn it over to Kelly Rose with Michigan to discuss the Michigan program.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. So I'm Kelly Rose. I'm the Chief Housing Solutions Officer with the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. And our LIHEAP program in Michigan is administered by our Department of Health and Human Services. And I'm our overall lead person for our ERA program administered by the Housing Authority. And for all those ERA grantees that are housing authorities, for most of us, we haven't done utilities before. It's not something that's typically part of our assistance programs. So I think the first thing that I wanted to highlight was using the LIHEAP's office expertise in informing your program design, and really go to those experts who have been doing this for years, know what utilization of those programs look like to inform your program design. So that's sort of my first takeaway from the coordination, that right from the get-go when this program was passed, starting to talk to Tammy from DHHS, who was not able to join us today, but working directly with her in informing our program design. And she also helped us get connected to all of the energy providers across the state. As I said before, energy assistance is not something we were typically doing. So we didn't have those connections with the people that we needed to within the energy providers to make sure that they knew about our program and that they could help promote the program with us. And that relationship really evolved over time. To make sure that we were effectively connecting people to the ERA program, and to start to do bulk estimated utility payments so that we could use our data and between the two systems to be able to help as many households as possible, and to be able to get long-term shut-off extensions placed on people's accounts while we were processing applications, because that bulk estimated utility payment had been made. So it really allowed kind of a win-win situation with the utility provider, getting a good chunk of money up front, but then placing essentially indefinite holds on those accounts so that people wouldn't experience shutoffs if we were having some delays in getting applications processed. We also used our LIHEAP and just the general application portal that MDHHS uses to connect people to rental and utility assistance pop-ups within that system, so that if any customers who are used to going to DHHS for rental assistance or for utility assistance, if they were searching for either of those two, they would get a pop-up that said, hey, we have this emergency rental assistance program, you should check this out. So it really helped us get off the ground quickly with lots of applications, going right to the source to where people are frequently searching and applying for benefits through DHHS and having those pop-ups. Another connection that wasn't exactly LIHEAP related, but also within the Department of Health and Human Services, is using an app that most Michigan SNAP benefit holders use to check their balances. We were able to have notifications on that system as well, notifying SNAP holders or SNAP beneficiaries that our emergency rental assistance program was up and running and able to help them with rent and utility assistance. One other aspect to this that I think was key is also consider using connections that your utility regulator has. So our utilities are regulated by the Michigan Public Service Commission, which isn't a wholly separate department, so our Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, but they were also a very key convener to get us also introduced to more of the energy providers, and provided great meeting connections. And I got plugged into reoccurring meetings with the energy providers that really helped to cement those relationships. And then that allowed for easier connection later down the road in the program program when the bulk utility payments became available to us all. We had those connections with higher up people within the utilities to be able to use those relationships to really help us move the needle on getting those bulk utility contract in place so that we could make that happen. So I think that takes me through most of my topics.
Okay, so Kelly, can you speak to how you talked a little bit about this, but how ERA and LIHEAP are coordinating resources and referring customers to both programs? I know you touched on that, but can you give us some more examples of how you were able to achieve that?
Sure. So yes, I talked a bit about the pop-ups within the system to notify people, but DHHS also did a wide variety of trainings to their staff people as well in all of their county offices to make sure that those staff people that were interacting directly with low-income renters across the state, that they knew about the program and could make sure they had the website readily available to be able to give to people to connect people. And we used the LIHEAP connections as well to make sure that the energy providers, we provided them with sort of our marketing toolkit with everything so that they were able to put on their websites and in inserts into bills and other methods of being able to contact people to really try to broaden the outreach, that anybody that was behind on their utilities knew that this program was available and could access it.
So do you have any best practices you would recommend to grant recipients looking to begin coordinating that ERA and LIHEAP program coordination?
Sure. Yeah, I would just say really go to the experts in your, especially if you're a state grantee, go to your other experts in state government with helping you get your program off the ground. It was definitely key to work with the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, that regulating arm of the utilities, as a convener so that we could get to meet the higher up folks within the largest utility companies within Michigan, and to really get a good connection and understanding of what we're hoping to achieve with the program and how we really want this to be a key program into helping people get caught up in their utilities and to be able to just take that burden off from those households to be able to have a little more ease in their housing situation with the rental assistance as well as the utility assistance, so that they're not so worried, as we all are with a lot of things going on, but trying to take that stress off of that family.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kelly. And I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing their experience with coordinating LIHEAP and ERA. We're now going to open the floor up for additional questions. And so some of the questions that we're asking are going to come off of our Q&A that you've already submitted. The first question we've had is, due to the emergency nature of both programs, LIHEAP and ERA, how do you suggest administrators avoid duplicating benefits when administrators might be working at the program simultaneously? Does anybody on the panel have information about that they would be happy to share, of how you can kind of avoid that duplication of benefits? And Akam, you can answer that question if you'd like.
I'm just waiting for others to see if anyone wants to speak about that issue.
Okay.
This is Kelly from Michigan. I guess I'll just jump in. I mean, one thing that we're able to do with almost every single utility provider in Michigan is having an online system where you can check balances like as of the previous business day. So it's, it's updated every single day so that you have a pretty good certainty that when you're funding a transaction, didn't have a LIHEAP payment 2 weeks ago or something like that, that this is the true current balance that you're working with. And while that doesn't, it's not a silver bullet, it doesn't prevent every single potential duplication if you're both looking at it, on that same day. But it's a pretty good certainty that you're not going to be funding duplicate payments when you're using an online system like that.
I'll just kind of I'll speak to a broader question that was on the Q&A, is LIHEAP considered a duplicate benefit? And it is not. The way to think about it is, we don't want utility companies to be paid, just as Kelly was saying, to be paid twice for the same bill. And there are important considerations when you're thinking about providing ERA assistance in terms of the limitation of the months of assistance provided and how it pairs with the rental assistance. So there is a certain amount of calculus that administrators on the ground need to do to think about how they consider providing the funds. But braiding the funds with the utility, with LIHEAP, thinking about how it all fits together and how it can really maximize housing stability on the ground. I think what we've heard here is that it's a very worthwhile exercise and something that can be really meaningful, particularly as we're entering into the winter months.
Yeah, hi. This is Akem. Thank you, Vanessa. And I think it's it's completely appropriate for a local agency or a grantee to braid both payments, but I think it becomes a little bit more difficult on a practical side as far as tracking those payments to the utility accounts, like credits and how much money is being credited from LIHEAP versus ERA. But from a LIHEAP standpoint, from the federal requirement standpoint, I'll just mention that there is an assurance called Assurance 7, which would apply for any LIHEAP payments. Basically, what it calls for is that utility companies, when they receive LIHEAP payments, they must credit the customer's account properly. Plus, they also have to, maintain consumer protections, things like that. And on the LIHEAP side, for the most part, this is achieved through a vendor agreement. So I think what I would encourage our LIHEAP grantees to do, and also local agencies to discuss this issue as a network, is to look at the vendor agreement for LIHEAP and see if it really speaks about this kind of coordinated benefit program, because historically, we haven't had two federal program like this available for utility payments, but in many states, there is also payments coming from utility companies as a percentage of payment income program or other kind of utility provided funding. So in those states, specifically, I think I remember in Pennsylvania and some Northeast states where they receive LIHEAP funding, the utility companies, plus they have their own funds available. So when that kind of braiding happens, they are supposed to keep a complete separate track of funding to the customer's account. From our standpoint, we do not have any issues or any restriction in terms of running credits, what we call on customer's account, as long as it's properly tracked. And then also from a federal perspective, from LIHEAP federal perspective, we don't have any maximum benefit that a local agency or a grantee can set. So, and then also just one final point that past due payments is also allowable if it's properly tracked and credited. From our standpoint, LIHEAP, I think the beauty of LIHEAP is that it's a block grant. So our grantees can design the program in a way that can maximize benefit and serve their prioritized households. But again, this could be more like a tracking or operational item for our best practice group to discuss in the future, how we can help that.
So we have another question, and this one's for Kelly. How are others ensuring that when the spending ERA funding, we aren't going to go over that 15th to 18th month of utility companies, and since utility companies in their areas don't always break down that past due balances by month?
So what we did in our program, I think, is a little different than how others have done this, but we've set up actually like caps, payment caps for all the utilities combined based off of household size, from data provided from our LIHEAP provider or LIHEAP agencies to show, here's average utility amounts, from our Public Service Commission, the regulator, as well as LIHEAP, to look at here are average consumption amounts. and then designed our payment caps to be only about 10 to 12 months of those averages. So feeling like we're very comfortable that we're underneath that 15-month total benefit that we can give. But then it's a little simpler approach when you know, okay, if a family has 2 people in their household, we can give up to $1,500 for total utility benefits. So if, looking at their different things. So we've done it a little differently than what I've heard most have done, by just simply looking at the bill and saying, if, today's, or if the most previous month was, $100 was the bill, just using that as your standpoint of that's a month, $100 is a month, and saying you could do, by $1,500 that way. But I think any grantee, as I've heard Treasury say lots of times, you just need to document your thought process for how you're looking at, designing your program, and to make sure that there's data behind that, to make sure that you're not exceeding those utilities months. But I think that is can be a difficult portion of the utility benefit, in potentially not being able to get essentially like a full 12 month of history, depending on the utility provider that you're working with.
And like you say, everybody's taking that kind of different approach, as we all do, with block grants and with this funding. The same question for Lorena. How do you guys ensure when you're spending that ERA funding, you're not going over that 15 to 18 month utility issue? If you have a utility company that really doesn't break down your past balances in the previous month.
Well, as it was said earlier, there is some calculus, is I think the term, to go along with determining those months. And in the we really haven't had an issue yet of a vendor not being able to provide either a consumption history that has dollars attached or a bill history. I think for the energy utilities in particular, they are so trained to provide that to us that we can use what usually they provide us. So we really have stuck to calculating the months using the history, where of course we run into complications, and where having LIHEAP available is really nice, is often those months that a tenant is behind in utilities is not the same months as they are behind in rent. Rent is usually the larger cost, so we really want to try to maximize the amount of rent assistance they can get. And so if we find, and we have found, where there's cases where we can't really go back and cover the entire arrearage on a utility, we then make sure that there's a real, that there's a definite connection to the utility programs, whether that's LIHEAP for the lower income folks, or to a utility run program to try to alleviate the rest of that arrearage. So we have been making partial arrearage payments in some cases when those months don't align real well. But we've been fortunate that we haven't come across a vendor yet, though I'm sure it's coming with some of the water associations and some of the other types of vendors, where we may not get that history, and we'll have to defer to our Department of Commerce and put some thought into how we're going to address that.
Okay, thanks. Just a question for Michael. What best practices would you highlight, Michael, for people who are starting their coordination or working through coordination issues right now?
I think I would say, if you can find existing relationships between your different, I think departments in particular, leverage those as much as you can. Make sure that you're meeting regularly. I think that that has been invaluable for us, just having kind of constant updates, bringing in the big stakeholders. And in our case, that has typically been the large utilities in the state. Hearing from them what's going right, what isn't going right, those have been really, really, really valuable for us.
So it's all about communication and coordination, it sounds like. That's the real key to everything, working with your utilities, working with your stakeholders, and working with your local administrative agencies, not only in just LIHEAP, but also your ERA coordinators and other OCS programs. Anyway, I like the one thing that was said today, no wrong door. There is no wrong door for anybody to enter to get help. So that's really great to hear. So I want to thank the audience today. We've kind of looked over our questions here. Again, if you have any additional questions, you can reach out and contact us. The people have been, our panelists have been adding their contact information in the chat room. So if you want to pick that information up from the chat, I would encourage you to do that. I do want to highlight, if we can move to the next slide, that we do have some upcoming office hours that are being scheduled in January. And we've had such a great response to the actual office hours that we scheduled. We're going to add 2 additional sessions to that and provide that technical and training assistance in smaller group sizes so you can ask individual questions and hear from your peers and just have more opportunity to support you in your work. OCS is committed to doing that. So we do want to remind you about our utility provider best practice webinar that will be coordinated early in 2022. We're going to bring out some best practices, and again, stay tuned for more information about that. We will be posting this PDF shortly with links to the resources mentioned today. And without any other questions, I'm probably going to be able to give you 5 minutes back of your day today, but I just want to thank everyone for their participation. We've got some key resources and links that will be posted, including the Treasury and OCS communications on coordination. And then if you weren't able to attend that White House meeting on the American Rescue Plan resources, please check that out. There's a fact sheet, there's a readout, and even event recording. If you haven't been able to see that, it's pretty important, and it really describes the administration and the approach we're taking in trying to encourage, you know, the braiding of resources in OCS and helping our lowest income customers due to the increase of prices and also, you know, the struggles that they face every day. And again, just want to thank everybody, including all of our panelists and everybody who's participated on the call today. And I just want to wish you all and thank you and wish you a happy holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you.